it isn't just oil that we're talking about. Oil is particularly important. Many pundits point out the fact that 20% of the world's oil flows through the Persian Gulf. What they neglect to mention is between 40 and 50% of the world's export oil flows through the Straits of Hormuz. For takers in the eastern part of the Pacific Rim, particularly Korea, Japan, and China, this is a particularly critical source of crude oil. But the difficulty extends beyond oil. The biggest supplier of liquefied natural gas to the world is Qatar, and that is shut in. The world's largest supplier of liquid nitrogen and probably export nitrogenous fertilizers is also in the Gulf. 30% of the world's supply of helium is in the Gulf. About 25% of the world's capacity for refining aluminum is in the Gulf. Perhaps 50% of the world's export supplies of sulfur and sulfuric acid are in the Gulf. So the circumstance that we talk about is important in the oil business, but it isn't limited to oil.
When the U.S. initiated its strikes, everybody in the shipping industry realized what was going to happen. They knew. I mean, I'm not a genius. I'm not an expert. I'm not a genius. I just know a lot of people. I read a lot. I'm pretty well informed on everything. I'm not the expert on everything, and I don't know everything. But I could have told you that if you launch an attack at Iran and you maintain that level of attack and come out and say it's going to be 4 weeks, shipping's going to lock down. I mean, there was not enough insurance in place to allow this to happen. But more importantly, there should have been a mechanism in place to pull in the ship operators, the insurance firms, to assure them, listen, this is what we're going to do to ensure safety, to keep the flow of goods moving. And did the whole video up above here that we talked about, that it's not just oil, it's fertilizer, it's helium, and there's a whole range of commodities that come out. But these three stories indicate to me that, man, the administration does not know how to handle global shipping. And let me be clear. There is no administration that I've seen in the past 30 years that I've been involved in shipping that knows how to deal with shipping. They really don't. But this is an example here of how it's kind of falling apart. First, this story from Bloomberg, U.S. Hormuz escorts may start by the end of the month. This is according to Energy Secretary Chris Wright. Now, Secretary Wright posted something yesterday that the U.S. was escorting a tanker through the Strait of Hormuz, and then he yanked that. Now he's saying it may be the end of the month before we do this. Okay, the U.S. has initiated this operation without sufficient forces in place to do both offensive and defensive operations. What do I mean? They have enough forces to initiate the offensive. They are thinking sea power, strike from the sea. They've got naval forces to accomplish this. They have air forces to complement it. What they don't have is enough forces to go into the Gulf and provide escorts, both on surface and in the air. That is a flaw. That is a fundamental flaw, because I guess nobody thought of that. I don't know. Or they didn't think it was enough of an issue to devote resources to do that. To me, that is an error. It's an error that should not have happened. It's an unforced error on the part of the United States. And again, don't ask me this. I'm a YouTube guy. Hi, YouTube here. I teach college. Don't come ask me. You have a maritime administrator, newly appointed, Steve Carmel, Captain Steve Carmel. Dude is a master mariner. He was a VP for a major shipping firm, president for another shipping firm, well-versed in shipping. Go talk to him. Or go over to the Federal Maritime Commission. You just appointed a new commissioner, Laura DiBella, who she knows shipping. She's got an entire staff there that knows international shipping. Literally, 2 people. They're there in D.C. Call them. Bring them into your office and talk to them. And if not them, I will give you a list of people involved in shipping, corporate, shipping guys, shipping women, you name it. There's a list of them I can give you. But the next one here kind of demonstrates another issue. U.S. to release 172 million strategic petroleum reserve barrels as new attacks drive oil higher. So it's releasing 172 million out of a record 400 million coordinated stock draw by the International Energy Agency and its member nations. So this is not just the United States, but 400 million barrels coming out of stocks to meet the shortfall that's coming out of the Persian Gulf region. Now, okay, hang on a second. let's be clear. As I talked to you about before, oil is not coming out of the Persian Gulf and heading right into a refinery. There is a coordinated element there. There are stockpiles, both afloat and ashore. It goes through. So what we're doing right now is draining down those stockpiles. And the influx of oil into the system is good. Don't get me wrong. People are going to take advantage of this. But what we really need to do is reopen the Persian Gulf. We cannot keep the Persian Gulf shut and close off 20 million barrels per day for a month. That's 600 million barrels you're talking about. You're releasing 400 million barrels. As I mentioned to you before, there's about another 100 million barrels that's afloat off Singapore and Malaysia. There's probably, it's probably about 1 billion barrels of oil afloat at any given time around in the world. Plus you have shoreside stocks and everything. This is a short-term issue. But if you're talking about not even starting convoy operations until the end of the month, well, then we have another problem. Then we have this story by Richard Mead over at Lloyd's List. Naval escorts would cap tanker transits at under 10% of normal volume. So despite public statements from the U.S. and European leaders, no escort system has been launched, and political, logistical, and security hurdles continue to stall any deployment. Again, I'm not sure what's being done. We listened to General Kane's statement 2 days ago. It sounds like nothing has really been done to get this going. Any protection scheme for Hormuz transit is unlikely to begin until additional U.S. Navy destroyers arrive or sail to the region. Convoy system would initially be focused on outbound transits to relieve the Middle East exports, though how the U.S. and or countries would prioritize transits is unclear. Iran's asymmetric threat, mines, drones, fast attack craft, remain the key risk, with even minimal mine-laying capability of halting all traffic, complicating any reopening of the strait. I think Richard aptly summarizes that. Plus, if you do a convoy operation, you are not going to escort 135 ships out in one time. You're going to bring out some high-priority vessels. You're going to get down to a trickle. As he says, maybe 10% of the volume is going to come out under escort. Now, maybe you won't need to escort some of them, Russian, Indian, who knows. Maybe the Iranians don't attack. But no matter what, you got to start this now. And it should have been planned for the day the attack happened. There should have been planned, hey, starting Monday, here's what we're going to initiate for convoy operations. At the very least, United States, get the 5 U.S. ships that are in the Persian Gulf stuck out. You have 5 ships that are stuck in there. You realize that, right? Crews are on there. They're exposed to danger. You have told them through a maritime advisory, avoid the area if possible. They can't. They're there. And then you've told them to stay 30 nautical miles away from any warship. That's, again, you are sending mixed messages out.
Iranian drones hit 3 Amazon data centers, 2 in the UAE and 1 in Bahrain, if these reports are accurate. These are not military bases. They are not associated with military bases. These are, big kind of office building type structures, or, well, they're data centers. They're full of servers. And when they were struck, financial systems all across the Gulf suddenly went dark, as did many other services around the world. In fact, some of the AI services were interrupted. And some Amazon services were apparently interrupted. And Amazon Web Services, which is one of the largest providers of internet, what would you call it, tools, capability in the world, Amazon Web Services told their customers to migrate their data to other parts of the world. It turns out that the reason why Iran targeted Amazon in Bahrain and the UAE was because their servers were providing the U.S. military with AI capability. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. A single ChatGPT query, if you go into ChatGPT and you say, what's the best restaurant in Portland where I can find, vegan food? In a couple of seconds, you'll get an answer. And that typical ChatGPT query takes about 0.3 watt-hours of energy. That's 0.3 of a watt. Not even 1 watt. Right? The old incandescent light bulbs, they were 60 watts. So you could do 180, about 200 queries and use the same amount of electricity as one light bulb. So it's not a lot of power. You know, people are like, you know, like I published a piece over on Daily Kos this morning, and there's a picture that Louise did using an AI product. And some wag comes on and goes, you shouldn't have Louise make these pictures with AI. It uses so much resources. Well, it turns out most of the resources that are being used by AI are for our military. I mean, this is pretty amazing. You know, this is the Dre dossier over on Substack asking, so why is Amazon building a campus in Indiana that will consume 2.5 gigawatts of electricity, roughly equivalent to powering half the homes in the entire state? Why is Meta planning a facility in Louisiana drawing 5 gigawatts? That's 5 billion watts. When a ChatGPT query is 0.3 of a watt, right? Why are they doing this in New York City? Why is OpenAI's Stargate facility in Abilene, Texas, already running at 200 megawatts and scaling toward 1.2 gigawatts? And then Dre Dossier writes, this only makes sense when you understand who the actual customer is. The military AI market is growing from $9.2 billion in 2023 to nearly $39 billion by 2028, a 33% annual growth rate. The Pentagon just awarded a $9 billion contract in 2020 to AWS, Google, Microsoft, and Oracle. And the Pentagon has also announced plans to build AI data centers on 4 military bases. Now, this is where it gets interesting. They write, when you see a gigawatt data center going up in rural America and the company won't tell your mayor what it's for, you are allowed to ask the question. I mean, maybe it's the training for the next generation of consumer AI, or maybe it's training the system that just helps select targets in Iran. The point is you don't know, and nobody is legally required to tell you. Now, here's where it gets totally wild. The Geneva Conventions, they were ratified in 1949, updated in 1977. And the additional protocols from 1977 include one called Article 52, parenthesis 2. This is of additional protocol number 1. And it notes that once a civilian object becomes a lawful military target, a civilian object becomes a lawful military target the moment it makes a, quote, effective contribution to military action. So, in other words, the minute that the Pentagon starts running their programs on Amazon's AWS data servers in Bahrain and the UAE, those servers, even though they have, your order for, a new spring jacket from Amazon, even though it's got that on it, that server has now become a military target.
The city of Baltimore uses about 6.5 gigawatts of electricity every year. So we are talking about adding 2 Baltimores to the grid every year between now and the early 2030s, if you believe the projections. Put another way, that's approximately 10 new large nuclear power plants a year, which we are nowhere there. And so what we basically are saying is there is tens of billions of dollars of new energy infrastructure that is required to serve this class of customers, these new data centers. And the question becomes, who pays for it?
The crisis of Gaza has really fallen under the radar as the war with Iran has intensified, and matters there are getting worse as Israel has closed the border crossings, closed the ability to get aid freely into Gaza, and there are still winter conditions. And in the West Bank, we're seeing a real catastrophe underway. There's no other word for it, in which Jewish settlers are simply attacking almost at will, and sometimes under the cover of Israeli soldiers, attacking Palestinian civilians as part of what appears to be a concerted effort to disappropriate them of their land. 6 Palestinian lives have been taken under this method and by settler attacks just in the first week of this war. And in Israel, within Israel, this is very little mentioned because, again, so much attention is being made to the government's failures and to the prowess of the Israeli military in Iran, that this unfolding catastrophe, a sort of de facto annexation of Area B of the West Bank, an area under Palestinian Authority control, is simply going unremarked, and yet it's taking lives and taking lands of people.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.